weather warming up here in Boise and the big weather change. We went from the low 50s to the high 70s, actually. Did a quick jump.
Cool. Yeah, it's getting warmer everywhere because I had family in from Colorado, and they're in the 70s. They returned to some nice weather. And out here, it's already in the 90s. It's been hot. Like, it's already like 80-something degrees out right now in the morning, and it's really warm. So, and everything's been pollinating and growing, and yeah, I had some allergies earlier, but it seems warm in a lot of places. But then
there's still some of the places around the country that are getting snow, so the weather's all screwed up.
Yeah, weather's all jacked. We're just jacking up this planet, dude.
Thanks a lot, aliens. Where are you?
Yeah, a little help here, guys. Throw us a frickin' bone here. So, speaking of aliens, I should apologize to the listeners for not having a show last week, and that was just because my family was in town. So I was busy. I thought I was going to be able to pull something off, but I decided to go to Sedona instead. And it was beautiful. Luckily, it wasn't in the 90s yet, but we got to hike and everything, and it was really nice. So you all had to sacrifice by not having a show. But we're back this week, and our guest is Larry Holcombe. He wrote the book, The Presidents and UFOs, A Secret History from FDR to Obama. And what's interesting about this is, first of all, everybody kind of thinks of Grant Cameron as the Presidents and UFOs guy, but he's kind of moved on. And he, after all these years of him investigating, he hasn't written a book, so this guy went ahead and did it. And it got printed by St. Martin's Press, which is a larger publisher, and it's always really exciting when a UFO book gets published by a larger publisher, because one, they do good, like Leslie Kane's, who's was a New York Times bestseller, and two, it gets to a wider audience, so a lot more people learn. I'm always excited about that. Don't you think there, Jason?
Absolutely, yeah, and a topic like this, and you and I have talked about it. I wish Grant would have jumped on this a while ago. But yeah, such a cool topic that definitely appeals to the wider general public, and having it published by such a big publisher is a great thing.
Yeah. So we talked to Larry about what he did to research and write the book. Interesting enough, as he'll tell us, he didn't lean very much on Grant Cameron's research, which is good on his part. Now, I got to say, there is a lot of it covers the mythology around presidents as well, which I think is important, so it's not just the really hard, credible, what we know, which I think there's a lot that we do know that is credible around presidents. Perhaps a book with just that would be really interesting, but probably, as, someone should do, he covered all of the mythology and the surrounding, alleged leaked stuff and everything that people think around presidents. But overall, it's a good read, and I think it's something that everybody should have as a reference, a pretty good book. So we talked to him about that, and we met him in Roswell. I don't know. I think you were out there. Do you remember meeting him?
I don't know. He met so many people. I'm not recalling him, no.
Yeah, he was a guy who had a table, and he even wrote about that, because he wrote about how, interesting enough, it was meeting Antonio and I that helped inspire the book, especially Antonio, because Antonio got him in touch with someone who inspired him to essentially write this book, and we'll talk to Larry all about that. So kind of cool.
Kind of very cool.
Yeah, so really neat. So Open Minds even got in the book. We helped inspire it without even knowing. So, neat stuff. So we'll talk to Larry in just a little bit. Before we do that, though, Jason and I will talk about some of the UFO news over the last couple of weeks. And do you want to start off? Which story do you want to cover?
Sure, I'll start off. There's been, so much happening with astrobiology lately, Alejandro, and I know it seems like the less sexy thing to talk about, but as you and I always bring up, these things are happening at such a rapid pace, and more research groups are doing more studies and using more tools to discover so much more in the search for extraterrestrials. And the story that I want to mention this week reminds me of you, Alejandro, because one of your, not one of your favorite expressions, but certainly something that I hear you say now and again is "what the heck," and that's exactly what this is. This project is called Heck. It's the hunt for exomoons with Kepler. And what these scientists are doing, we've talked about the Kepler Space Telescope so many times on this show. Fantastic tool that NASA has to search for planets outside our solar system. And what Heck is doing is it's using data collected by Kepler, but also using a supercomputer with that data. They're coming up with these possibilities where exomoons could exist around exoplanets, pairing that with data from Kepler and finding out these areas that most likely host exomoons that could be habitable themselves. And we've looked, using our own solar system as an example, we found that the places in our own solar system that are the most likely places to harbor alien life are moons. So if that's the case in our own solar system, why not apply that same principle to other solar systems as well? So that's what they're doing, further enhancing or amplifying the possibility or places in the universe where extraterrestrial life might exist. Now, Alejandro, I'm excited about that. I'm glad somebody's doing it, but there's so many places right here in our solar system and closer to home that I wish they would all get together, all of these scientists, and focus their efforts and money, all the dollars on these tasks to do something closer to home that has a better chance of success.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's good that somebody's doing it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of scientists have to look at something, and some of these guys are just looking at telescope data and stuff like that. So not really, physical wheels on the ground as a robot on the ground,
right,
like we do now. But it is, I think I share in what you're talking about, in the excitement, how even the moons in our own solar system are now so promising when it comes to possible life. And it's extremely exciting. People like you and I knew about, these moons that are out there, and like Europa or something like that, with water under the surface. But now it's getting more mainstream with NASA looking at it and less sci-fi. And it's extremely exciting, all of the places right here in our own solar system that feel like they're so close, that show, high potential for extraterrestrial life. So it is really exciting, and I think, when you feel like you're on the cusp of it, it's like, come on, guys, focus on this one thing.
I know.
And make it happen.
I know, but, with this broad approach and, all of the potentially habitable worlds, which include planets and moons, I think we're just getting closer to the public realization that life is everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And it's important work, because if life is discovered on a local moon, like Enceladus or something, then that work is going to be even more important, because it's going to be more likely that their work is going to be fruitful, that there will be other moons with that have life, and perhaps even Ewoks, a forest moon out there with Ewoks.
Hopefully with Ewoks. That would be amazing.
Yeah, they are adorable.
I would love to be friends with Ewoks.
Mm-hmm. Ewoks are cool.
They know how to party, too.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because, one of the stories that I wrote that did terrible, that nobody looked at, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. There were over 1,000 people who looked at it, but didn't do as well as others. I think it's so exciting, and that is that the Library of Congress and everything they're doing to get scientists together to talk about astrobiology. In this case, they're doing something called the Bloomberg Dialogues, and this is just the first of many meetings they're going to have throughout the year, where they're talking about the discovery of extraterrestrial life and its effects on religion. And I think it's really smart of them to get with these scholars to talk about the theology and the philosophy, so that when I think that a lot of scientists are agreeing that we're on the cusp of discovering, some microorganisms, some kind of official announcement of life elsewhere, and what effects that will have, and being prepared for that, so it can be easily accepted, even amongst religions, because certainly there can be friction in philosophy and theology when it comes to that sort of thing, and the more we've worked that out, the less I think then combative than religious organizations may be to the science that's being done.
The discussions are definitely starting. We're seeing more and more of these public forums gathering scientists and officials in a public forum, in an official setting, and starting to explore these issues that will arise and perhaps already have arisen. But we're seeing multiple events like this every year happening with prominent scientists discussing the extraterrestrial issues, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Library of Congress is doing a lot of this. So if you live in Washington, D.C., you got to attend these. We'll post more about them, but we've got links on our story about this too. And if you went, let us know how that went and, what the discussions were like and what you thought. That would be really cool if you could share that with us. So, yeah, exciting stuff when it comes to astrobiology. Very, very exciting.
Well, do you have a story to talk about that isn't astrobiology?
Yeah, I want to talk about UFOs, baby. And this is actually a follow-up to a story that you wrote. So you had written about this lady who had seen, a couple orbs, and she videotaped them for about 20 seconds. Really what she videotaped was interesting but hard to really make anything out of it. She said the two orbs combined and moved apart several times before shooting off into the distance. And this is near Leicester, I believe is how it's said, in the town of Hinckley, and it happened in some of the towns around the Barwell and Earl Shilton where these people had seen it. But now what's exciting is that the Hinckley Times wrote about it, and other witnesses have come forward to say, hey, I saw that thing too. So it's really cool, including a police officer who was off duty who says he watched these things hover silently over the town of Barwell for about a minute. He said they did not resemble normal aircraft, and all of them say about the same thing, that they saw these two lights that were floating around and then took off, and none of them feel as though they were Chinese lanterns or anything. So kind of a cool story. Really, it's great, to get this corroborating witness testimony that possibly, something really weird happened.
It's always really exciting when we get follow-ups to sighting reports. It's even more exciting when we have additional witnesses who substantiate the sighting. Mm-hmm. So that is really cool. And I want to point out that one of these witnesses who came forward says he was walking his dog when he saw the UFOs. Mm-hmm. So we see this so many times with UFO sightings. So people, what does this tell you? Walk your dogs more, and when you walk your dogs, watch the sky.
Yeah. I mean, anything that gets people outside. So we always have people, I was out having a smoke. But it's much healthier on many, many levels, psychologically, physiologically, to walk a dog than to smoke. So yeah, walk your dog, go jogging, but watch the sky, and you'll probably see a UFO eventually.
Yep, that is good advice.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's one more story I want to talk about.
I'm going to start recommending that to people, actually, when they say, where can I go to see a UFO, or how do I see a UFO?
Good point.
Walk your dog.
Because we get asked that a lot.
That's right.
And I usually say go to places where people see UFOs a lot, but walking a dog is another good, healthy alternative.
I like it.
Mm-hmm. Dogs are cool, too. Anyway, I want to ask you about this one real quick before we're done. And this is kind of an exciting one that I think is really strange. That's why I want to get your opinion on it. We talked about it a bit on Spacing Out. But this one with the MOD helicopters allegedly chasing 4 UFOs in England. Now, the witness actually got a picture of this UFO, and it looks strange. Although the picture they got only shows one object. It doesn't show 4. And the one picture it shows with the helicopter is kind of dubious. I mean, the helicopter is way off in the distance, and it's a tiny little helicopter. So I'm not so sure about that. But what is in that picture is weird. It's this ring-shaped thing.
Yeah, it's really weird because it's a very finely defined, I don't know, it's a perfect ring. Some people have suggested that it's a smoke ring, and, we've seen that before in photos, and they can stay tightly formed rings in the sky for long periods of time. I'm not sure that's what we're seeing in this photo, but it's a possibility. But I agree with you. I mean, for people who are out on a picnic or whatever, and seeing these objects that obviously surprised them, they took the time to go in and grab the camera and take photos. Photos aren't that great, and for being confident that it was an MOD helicopter chasing these UFOs, really, based on the photos, we don't get a good enough look at it to determine if it's an MOD helicopter or not. But you're right. I mean, for saying there were 4 UFOs, we never see a photo showing 4 UFOs together. So there are some suspect things with this whole case, but the photos that were captured are interesting.
Yeah, ring-shaped object. When I look at that, I cannot, certainly not immediately say this is that or the other, and I haven't seen much good speculation either on what that they might be. Yeah, we had the incidents with the ring circles, but those were close to the ground and near an event where they were shooting off cannons or something that would create that circle. So, yeah, pretty weird, pretty interesting. So
yeah, and one other thing, I mean, with the witness testimony, with this photo, seeing a smoke ring, that could be confusing to people. It looks weird in the sky. They would take a picture of it, say that's weird, that's a UFO, but in this case, the witnesses do say that they saw the UFOs zoom off. So that's their testimony. You can believe it if you want. If this is a smoke ring, then the witnesses are fabricating evidence and they're just creating a hoax. But we don't know that that's the case here. I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah. Although it is completely possible it is a smoke ring, so I don't know. Hopefully, what helped with the last case where it was, kind of definitive that it was a smoke ring was other people came forward and said, well, I was in the area, this was what was going on here. It was a smoke ring. And so that case was solved. So hopefully people will come forward. I know we have a lot of listeners in England. So go check out the story, see what you think, and then watch our latest edition of Spacing Out, where we talk more about it, and you could see more of the pictures and stuff. And then see what you think, and let us know if you know something about this. Right?
Yes, please.
So, otherwise, there's a lot of great UFO sightings from MUFON that we posted in the last week as well that Roger Marsh has written about. So go check those out. None of them had any pictures or videos, or else we probably would have talked about them. But they're still very interesting accounts nonetheless. So check that out. And was there any other news that you wanted to mention, my friend?
No, sir. That is it for me.
All right. Well, go take some vitamin C. Maybe try to channel a healing extraterrestrial to help you with your cold, and I hope you feel better, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, we'll talk to you next week then, Jason.
I hope so.
Yeah, unless something comes up, we go on vacation again or something.
Right.
But
I'll be healthy.
Good. So let's go ahead and talk to Larry Holcombe. I am very happy to welcome to the show Larry Holcombe. Hello, Larry.
Hello, Alejandro. And you'll have to excuse me for the stumbling there a bit. My family name on my mother's side was Alexander.
Oh.
And every time I say Alejandro, I want to say Alexander. So it's
yeah.
Pardon if you notice that hesitation, you'll know what's going on.
No problem. If you want to use Alexander, you can. Especially like people from Greece or even I think especially from other countries who Eastern European countries who are used to Alexander often will call me that. So that's not a problem.
No, I think I can handle Alejandro okay.
Yeah, you're doing just fine with it. So, well, thank you for coming on the show. We've talked occasionally in the past, and we'll get to it. But you even mentioned that in the book, so I was very flattered to see that. But we'll talk more in detail there. But before we do, I want to talk about how your background and how you got interested in the topic of UFOs.
Well, it goes back to when I was a junior in high school, and which was in the late 50s, unfortunately. I guess it's fortunate I'm still around. But I read a couple of Major Donald Kehoe's books, Flying Saucers from Outer Space and Flying Saucers Are Real, I believe, were the two books. And I became hooked with his passion and believability and the fact that the Air Force was not telling what they knew and so forth. And then I saw him on the Armstrong Circle Theater, and I saw his sound cut off. And I knew from that point on that, I was a youngster, and I thought he was going to be on the Armstrong Circle Theater, and you'd see banner headlines around the world. And as it turned out, that the Air Force censored the show. So from then on, I knew that there was something to it, that the phenomenon was real, and I became infatuated with it, and it really became a silent avocation with me, because back in those days, if you believed in flying saucers, as they were called then, or later UFOs, you were looked at as somewhat of a nut. So I did it silently. I was only interested in the mainline research by people such as Stan Friedman, the great atmospheric physicist Dr. James E. McDonald, and of course Dr. J. Allen Hynek. These folks, Jacques Vallée, and I was not interested in the fringe, and really my basic thrust in research has been in flying saucers / UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
When I retired, took early retirement a few years ago, I wanted to write, and I wrote a novel. Looking for a plot for the novel, I decided that I've been studying the UFOs and government cover-up for years. Why not use that as a plot for the book called Great River Disclosure? And from that, of course, the story goes on that the UFO Museum in Roswell saw the book. They liked it, invited me out to speak as an author, and I've been coming every year since. So, and when I met Stan and Don Schmidt and you and Antonio, and I mentioned Bob Emenegger, or the documentary UFOs Past, Present, and Future, that I thought was a outstanding, unique documentary from the standpoint that it seemed to have the approval of the government. There was no counterpoint in the documentary, and it having what seemed to be government approval, and also stating that UFOs, some UFOs are conceivably extraterrestrial in nature. So I contacted Bob Emenegger. The idea for this book came about. I started doing research, spending time in presidential libraries, which people may not enjoy. I enjoyed a great deal. But anyway, that's a quick summary of where we are and how the book came about.
Mm-hmm. What about your professional career? You mostly worked in sales, and you owned your own company for a period of time.
Yeah, I went to. I enlisted in the Army, the Army National Guard, after high school. After I finished my duty with them, I enrolled in Richmond Professional Institute, which is now Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, and took journalism for 2 years. But I had unfortunately established some debt that I thought that I had to get away and go and get a job and bring in some income. So yeah, I did. I started in commercial in sales. I was in sales of commercial construction products. Later started my own manufacturing rep agency, and about 1999, I got an offer from one of the manufacturers that I represented, one of the so-called offers that you can't refuse, to go to work for them and start a military sales division, and that's what I did. Because I was the only one of their sales reps, their independent reps around the country that was selling to the military and understood the military. So I started a military sales division for them and stayed with that until 2006, and spent about 100,000 air miles a year sitting in airplanes going here and the other to military bases. But it was a fun job.
Mm-hmm. So you retired and became a writer, and you must have done pretty well for this book to get published by St. Martin's.
I like the Emenega story very well, and I like the documentary very well. And as I'm sure you know, in the publishing world, an unknown writer to get an agent, a literary agent, is about as easy as flying to the moon by batting your arms. It's almost impossible. But I was very fortunate. I had an idea for the book. I sent it to several literary agents. One got back to me and said, if you would like to take the time to write up a proposal for a work of nonfiction on this, I'll send you an outline, and you work on it and get back to me. And I did, and I worked on the outline, which I think ended up being about 18,000 words. I sent it to him, and he, after 2 or 3 months, emailed me and said, I've got a sale for your book. He said, as a matter of fact, I've got 4 publishers interested.
Wow.
And St. Martin's gave me the best offer, and that's who we went with, and they've been great. I mean, they're working with a name big-time publishing house, and having all of their support, and having a publicist to work with, and their marketing people, and I'm working with Mark Resnick, who's executive editor at St. Martin's. It's been great. I mean, it's a whole different world, and I can't say enough about having an agent who has been marvelous in getting these things done for me.
Right.
As a matter of fact, he just sent me an email yesterday telling me that we have received an offer from a Japanese publisher to buy the rights to the book to publish it in Japan.
Wow, great.
And the book is also has been sold to an Italian publisher. So we have not only here in the States, but it will be published in Italy and Japan.
Wow, great. So you had this interest in this topic for decades. Right. Why now? Why did you decide this is a time where I'm kind of coming out of my UFO closet to do this?
Why now? Why coming out of the closet? I didn't really feel like I was coming out of the closet now, because I think now people are very savvy. I'm talking about back in the 50s and 60s. If you talked about UFOs, you were frowned on, or even the 70s. But I think we've become far more savvy. We've lived through the nuclear age. We've lived through. We are much more tuned to what's going on in space and what with all of the space telescopes that we have, and there's almost weekly we're finding out new wonders in space, and things that we believed as a positive are no longer positive. That there are new theories, and so I think that overall people, if they found out, if it became public, if it was disclosed, if disclosure came about, I think people would simply shrug their shoulders and say, gee, that's interesting. We'll move on with life. I think we've become that sophisticated. So it wasn't too hard for me to write a book. I'm sure people laugh a little bit still and snicker, but I don't care. I believe in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I've studied it a long time. I believe in it. I'm a staunch believer in it. And if people want to laugh at my belief, so be it. I don't care.
So I'm happy, to have found out that, you had mentioned it was when you got to meet Antonio and I. Antonio, of course, used to work with Open Minds, a colleague of mine, still a friend. He's kind of become a hermit. In fact, I think I'm the only one who actually talks to him occasionally because he's just kind of hidden out in his apartment nearby out here. But we were at Roswell. I've been there every year. Antonio used to come as well. And we got to meet you, and that meeting, especially with Antonio for you, became important.
Very important.
And
very important.
Was kind of the impetus to this book.
Yeah. It really, the book, when I sent as I said before, when I sent my idea for a book to this agent, the agent got back to me and said, I think this is a great idea, but I don't think you've got enough information here to make a book out of what you have. That is the Emmenegger story, the story of the documentary and the story of making the documentary and all the background. He said, I think if you could, and this had to do with the Nixon administration, of course, if you included all the presidents, modern presidents from FDR forward, then I think you could have something, and I'll send you an outline on how to do that if you're interested. Well, my initial thought was, gee, to try to get information on presidents is next to impossible. I mean, it's you get bits and pieces of stuff, but you go into presidential library, into the archives in presidential libraries, and if you get a file that should have some really good information in it, it's redacted. It's taken out of the file. So to find a smoking gun in a presidential library is next to impossible, and to get solid information on presidents is I knew would be very difficult. But the more I thought of it, the more I thought, here's an opportunity. When I looked at it, and I could see that even though some of the presidents were not real fond of each other, there was still a common bond, a thread that I saw running through all of the presidential administrations, especially the shift in power from what the Truman administration had set up as far as the study of the UFO or flying saucer issue. I saw that eroding in the Eisenhower administration, where the power or the control of UFO information was being taken away from the executive branch and going into the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex. And I became fascinated with that, and I could see a story starting to weave from that. And although many of the facts, many of the sightings and events that I list in the book are known by you and other ufologists, what I wanted to do was write a book that would address the people that I call the people that have an interest but little background knowledge of the subject, and that this would give them an overall picture using presidential administrations. The casual observer is what I call them, and this would be a book that would. It's a very complicated subject that goes in so many different directions that to try to compress it into one book was difficult, but I thought that I could give a general overview, and people would recognize that the Air Force was deeply involved, even though they claimed they weren't. They were deeply involved in this subject, and the discourse within the Air Force between those that had researched the subject and those that hadn't, and all of this was fascinating to me. So I hope I've achieved my goal in writing a book that will be somewhat of a textbook to the casual observer to get a better understanding of the basic UFO phenomenon.
I was curious, at the time when you started writing the book, were you familiar with Grant Cameron's work?
Yes.
And the reason I ask is because you, I think a lot of people assume that you would rely on his work, but you actually didn't. You went out and did your own work. You visited these libraries yourself.
I read a lot of Grant Cameron's work. I often wondered why he had never written a book on this subject. I've read his articles on his website, and I did contact him and ask him a couple of questions, and he said he'd have to dig into his archives and he'd get back to me, and he never did. So I just sort of let it drop at that. I know he's a hard worker. He's certainly done a lot in work with the history of presidents and UFOs, but I didn't want to push the issue. I guess, Alejandro. I didn't, because maybe he thought I was walking on his side of the street. I don't know.
Well, I think it was probably more along the lines of, from knowing him very well, that's an old chapter of his life, and he's just moved on to other things. And the way he is, he's so focused on right here and right now that he's all about what he's doing now. And that's
interesting.
Yeah.
Because his new book, the name which escapes me, Area 51, and the government cover up, and it really doesn't go into the present.
Right. Which is what he's known for.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I did want to get into Emenager because, like you said, Antonio got you in touch with Emenager, and what he told you, I mean, really had an impact on you, and it seems like even really shaped kind of, in a way, your understanding of at least how you felt what was going on in the background with presidents. What was it? Maybe if you could share with us what Emenager told you, and how it related to Nixon.
Well, Emenager was called by Richard Nixon. Let me start this way. Richard Nixon, who is looked as a villain now by many, many people, when he was president in his first term, he was extremely popular. Extremely popular. As a matter of fact, he was reelected by an almost historic landslide. So that means he was very powerful. And I think that of the presidents after Eisenhower, Nixon probably did have a pretty good background knowledge of the UFO issue, because he was vice president for 8 years under Eisenhower, and had a great deal of respect, I think, within the intelligence community. So I think that Nixon may be the exception to the rule of later presidents that were kept out of the loop of knowledge. Anyway, Emmenegger was a fraternity brother of H.R. Bob Haldeman, Nixon's chief of staff. And Emmenegger was very successful in the advertising business in Los Angeles with Gray Advertising. Bank of America was one of his clients. Well, Haldeman knew of this success. The committee to reelect the president wanted to make a documentary. Now, what I don't know is if Nixon told them he wanted a documentary made on UFOs, and he wanted some level of disclosure to be made. That's entirely possible when you think of his connection with Jackie Gleason, who was a close friend and who was deeply involved in the UFO issue, and was upset because the government was not disclosing what they knew. And so you had Nixon with Gleason. Nixon had also been very successful in opening relations with China, which was a absolutely closed country, so he broke that ice. He started detente with the Soviet Union, and in a lot of respects, I know that a lot of people hate Nixon, and he certainly had a lot of flaws, but in a lot of respects, in some respects, he conceivably made this a safer world to live in for a period of time. Anyway, he had a great deal of power, and with all of his accomplishments, if he were to come out and make disclosure of an extraterrestrial presence known to the public in some way, in some manner, or to some level, it would really have added to his historical presidency. And Emmenegger was brought in as a consultant to make a documentary. Now, he was told that it was just to be some scientific documentary, and he and his partner, Alan Sandler, were run all over the United States looking at secret projects that the military were involved in. I know it was laser research at Wright-Patterson and research with demolition using dolphins and such things. But Bob was then taken, and his partner, Alan Sandler, was taken to Norton Air Force Base in a very secure facility and told, would they consider making a documentary on UFOs? And they were stunned. And they were told by the official that ran the facility, whose name was Paul Shartle, that if they agreed to do so, they would be given something like 600 feet of 16-millimeter film that showed an actual landing at Holloman Air Force Base of a extraterrestrial UFO, flying saucer. And obviously they were stunned and taken back. As Emmenegger, as Bob told me, he said, I didn't know anything about flying saucers. He said, the only thing I knew was what my wife Margaret brought home from the tabloids from the supermarket. And so anyway, they said yes, they would do it. They were flown to Washington to where they went to the Pentagon and were met by several people that told them the smart thing for them to do would be to get on a plane, fly back to Los Angeles, and keep their nose out of this stuff. And Sandler, according to Bob, Sandler had enough of being browbeat, and he said, give me a phone. I'm going to call the White House and get this straightened out right now. The White House is the one that told us to come here. Well, at that point, the mood changed. They were taken upstairs to the office of Colonel William Coleman, who was head of public relations, Air Force public relations, and Coleman sort of gave him the same sort of speech. Then he took him into the office, sat him down, and told him about his own UFO sighting that he had made as a pilot, flying a B-25, I think. Later, they were sent to Wright-Patterson, where they met Colonel George Weinbrenner, who was head of Air Force, the name escapes me, Foreign Technology Division. Weinbrenner, Emmenegger said he walked up to Weinbrenner's desk and said, Colonel Weinbrenner, is it true that a UFO landed at Holloman Air Force Base, and you're going to give us film of it? And he said at that point, Weinbrenner looked at him, got up from his desk, walked over to a chalkboard, and drew a picture of a jet fighter. He said, this is a MiG, gentlemen, and we don't know a damn thing about it. But the Russians know all about all of our aircraft. And he said he went on like that. Bob Emmenegger said Weinbrenner went on like that and went on like that. And while he was talking, he went over to a bookshelf and pulled a book down and handed it to Emmenegger and opened it to the front cover. And in it was addressed to my good friend George Weinbrenner from J. Allen Hynek. And it was a book on flying saucers. He gave the book back to Weinbrenner. Weinbrenner talked to him a few minutes, put the book up, thanked him for coming, and ushered him out the door without saying a word about UFOs. And they were baffled. But what it told them was Weinbrenner was telling them that, yes, everything you've heard is true. We have the film, but he didn't want to say anything in his office because they felt that the office, all of the offices there were bugged, and people were listening to conversations. So that's a brief. They made the documentary. They got funding from John D. MacArthur, I think it was, president of Bankers Life and Trust. They got funding to make the documentary. Everything was set to go. They'd hired Rod Serling of the Twilight Zone to do as the narrator of the documentary. Everything was set to go, and they got a call from Bill Carruthers, I think it was, at the White House, and said the use of the film has been withdrawn. And Emmenegger was stunned, and he said, why? He was only told is that the president in this Watergate matter the president has been consumed with this Watergate matter. He thinks that this would not be helpful now, but would be detrimental. Go ahead and make the documentary. We'll open doors for you. We'll do whatever we can. And he could see why Emmenegger still was distressed, and he said, you can say at the end of it that this is what may happen or may have already happened, and you can show it from Holloman Air Force Base and have an animation of a UFO landing. And that's exactly what happened at the end of the documentary. But it's clear that the government gave them support because you had Colonel Coleman walking the halls of the Pentagon and standing under the picture of Hoyt Vandenberg talking about the very famous estimate of the situation, which has never been found. And as you well know, you don't take film crews into the Pentagon and have a military, even though Coleman was newly retired at that time. You don't have them do that. You're not able to do that if you don't have government support. And so, as I said in the book, this whole documentary, there was no looking through chain link fences with telephoto lenses and trying to, stand up on a mountaintop looking down at Area 51. This had the support of the government. This had Bob Friend, who ran Blue Book, as you know, for a while, interviewing the flight crew, the captain or major captain, I think, Cohen, and his helicopter flight crew that had a UFO encounter over Mansfield, Ohio. All done with military personnel. And I think it's a remarkable documentary that just had fallen through the cracks, and that I wanted it revived, and I wanted people to know about it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. That story is so incredibly fascinating and mysterious, and it's one of that I think is kind of I consider one of the lower hanging fruit, in that you do have Emmenegger, who was apparently approached, and they cooperated with him. I've never heard of the military ever saying, anybody representing the military saying Emmenegger's lying about this story, and he's told it many, many, many times. So it is fascinating, and I could see how that connection with Nixon would then drive your fascination around.
I'll tell you a very quick story. I don't know how much time we have left, but very quick. I was talking to Stan Friedman about it, and Stan said, he said, I met Emmenegger and Sandler in Los Angeles and had lunch with them. He said, I was offered my service. I wanted to be in the documentary, but they turned me down. And he laughed, and he said they turned me down because they wanted all military people. And that was fine. But he said, at the time, I had a Russian document that had been given to me on UFOs, but it was all in Russian. And I told them about it. And either Emmenegger or Sandler, I think it was Sandler, said, give it to me, and I'll have it translated for you. And so Stan said he did give it to him, and thought that, he would hear from him in 2 or 3 months. He said about 2 or 3 days later, he had the translation back. They'd sent it back to him. At that point, he said, I knew they had high-level government contracts. It wasn't any baloney about it. He said, because obviously the government had equipment that could translate Russian into English that was still highly classified, that they used to do this, and did it very quickly, computer equipment. So he said, it was never any doubt in my mind that Bob and Sandler had high level, and still do. I don't know about Sandler, but I talked with Bob not long ago, and he's doing well in his retirement home in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I find interesting, and I think good, that people I think will be interested in, is that you do cover kind of the outstanding mythology in the UFO arena around what presidents may or may not know, and you give your own estimation as to whether you think something is credible or not. And I think you have some great analysis on these various reports or anecdotal information and research as to why you think it may or may not be true. But what I think I love that you covered here too is how in especially the 50s and the 60s, there was this ongoing battle that is well documented within the military as to what the nature of UFOs were, and how it was a topic that was taken very seriously and debated as to whether they were extraterrestrial or not.
Right.
Such
right.
as
I call that to me that's the golden years. From the late 40s up until the Condon Report, the what I call the very flawed Condon report of 1969. Those years were really the golden years for us that want to study ufology, because there are some paper trails there. After going into the 70s, things changed, and of course, Blue Book was closed, and the Air Force was extremely happy that University of Colorado took the $500,000 carrot and got Condon, who thought the whole thing was, as he said, damn foolishness. And his report, of course, as you know, is really nothing like what the Colorado project, rest of the Colorado project report actually was. He even fired a few people. But anyway, that's another subject that takes some time.
But in the 50s, I mean, what were, for example, you referred to the estimate of the situation, which was the Project Sign, essentially estimate of the UFO situation after they had done years of UFO research, where they entertained the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Right. Yeah, they wrestle with it. The members of Project Sign wrestle with writing the estimate, and I think that what pushed them over the edge, so to speak, is the Charles Whitted Eastern Airlines encounter with a UFO over Alabama, I believe it was. And that incident sort of pushed the Sign group on to write the estimate of the situation that ended up by saying, in essence, well, I mean, I don't know what it ended up saying, because nobody, J. Allen Hynek said he had seen it, but it apparently was destroyed, but acknowledged by Air Force personnel that it existed. And that the estimate, in essence, said that when you look at everything and you strip everything away, the only answer that we can come up with is that we're dealing with extraterrestrial craft. Well, that report was handled like a hot potato from one command to another as it went up the chain of command to General Hoyt Vandenberg. And when it hit Vandenberg's desk, he apparently went ballistic and said, "This is not going to stand. We're not going out with this report. Redo it. Take this extraterrestrial hypothesis out of it, or what have you." But anyway, it was the death bell for Project Sign. They closed Project Sign down and sent everybody that worked on Project Sign probably to Antarctica or somewhere. and of course, then Project Grudge came along, which was nothing but a propaganda. They didn't do any research. It wasn't anything but a propaganda tool. As was Blue Book, which followed Grudge to some degree, except for the years when Ruppelt was running Blue Book, and I think that Ruppelt did a very good job. But after that, Bob Prinn came in at some point, and I think that he wanted to do a good job, and I think he was handcuffed by the Air Force. So it's a long and involved story that I hate to talk about the Air Force because I really am very proud of our Air Force, and I think I have great friends in the Air Force, and I think it's a wonderful branch of the service, as all the military is. But when it comes to the issue of UFOs, they stumbled around and bumbled around and lied, and I think did great disrespect and have done great disrespect to themselves. And wonder, Alejandro, if the reason that disclosure is so difficult now is because so many things were done back then that would reflect in such a negative way on the government that people are. It's one reason that whoever the holders of the secrets are afraid to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no question in my mind there were laws broken. And there could be serious laws broken. And
well, Ruppelt, in his book is certainly a less conspiratorial angle, but he's very critical himself, saying exactly what you said. They stumbled and bumbled. He acknowledges that the estimation of the situation existed, and it did have the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which did upset Vandenberg. But when you look at it, and I read that part, where you wrote in your book how you're sympathetic to the Air Force, at least you appreciate the armed services, all of them, and what they've done, and you have great respect. But I wonder, having written this book and seen all the decisions that were made, would you have done it differently? What should they have done? Because I always kind of struggle with that, in that I can see how they've got a real hot potato in their hands, and it would be a difficult thing to deal with.
Let me address it like this. I think that what Truman did in concealing UFOs, and even Eisenhower, was perfectly reasonable. And if I had been in their position, it's what I would have done also, because we were dealing with a very fragile population of the world. And to know that there were craft that could fly, especially in our country, after we were victorious, and to know that after this terrible war that killed 50 million people and destroyed 1,600 cities, that after this terrible war and the psyche of the population was so fragile, to come out and say that there are mystery aircraft, mystery vehicles that can enter our airspace at will and fly anywhere they want to and do anything. As time went on and we got into the nuclear age and people became more sophisticated, then I think the lid of secrecy should have been lifted. The problem probably lies in the area that, and this is where I get very cynical, the military-industrial complex saw great wealth in these the technology that was being turned over to them. And there was great power amassed. Where there's money, there's power. And this is what happened in the Eisenhower administration when the military-industrial complex got so involved in it. And I think that things were done then, were done then that really broke the law seriously in a number of ways. So I think that you kind of had a catch-22. Things had been done that shouldn't have been done, that prevented the release of information after the end of the war and we started our great industrial comeback in the 50s and 60s. So if you get the picture of what I'm saying, I think that we did the right thing to conceal it at first, but then when we should have started divulging these secrets, it would have put a bad light on so many people for things that had been done that it couldn't be revealed. So I hope I'm getting a point across here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the book you do include the MJ-12 papers, and you're a subscriber to the idea that they probably, you feel, I think, some of them or many of them are kind of revealing the secret nefarious history.
A few.
Yeah, so a few of them.
A very few. Very few. I'm not real comfortable with the Tim Cooper documents.
Mm-hmm. Kind of along the lines of Stanton Friedman, who feels similarly.
Stan and I pretty much share, and I've read Stan's research, and I think it's good, solid research, and I pretty much go along with Stan, not because he's a friend, which he is, but because I think it's pretty solid. I know that most people don't. Most people in ufology don't, but that's okay. We all have our differences.
Yeah. Well, and but I mean, in that, and I think so the audience knows, people listening, that when they get your book, which I think many will appreciate, because it's better to have more information than less, I think, that you do share, those alleged leaked secret histories that are out there regarding presidents, including ideas about possible Kennedy's death being attached to the UFO topic, and some other things, although you do, balance those ideas, but that it is complete.
I want people to make their own decision.
Right.
I'm not all that comfortable with Bob Wood and Dr. Bob Wood, who's a great fellow. They really are very sold on the Byrne memo. I'm not, but I put it in the book because it's there.
Yeah.
I've got to cover it. It's whether it's true, whether it's a factual document or not. The fact remains that it is there. It exists. So I had to put it in the book. And all I'm saying is, let the reader hear the facts. Let the reader make the decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I agree. I mean, I certainly don't. And that's this is interesting about this field. We don't all agree with each other over different things. However, what's important is that we work together and get along. I mean, I think people of the show know that, and that Stanton and I have had our debates, but I love Stanton. I love the Woods. These are good friends I've known for years, and that's why I want people to know that you're inclusive in this book of all of these different ideas, so that it's a good book for people to be able to get a full understanding of what's out there in ufology regarding presidents and UFOs.
Well, I appreciate that. They're very nice words, and I hope I did a decent job with the book. And the book is truly how I feel and how I view the subject. I focus on one thing. I have focused on one thing, and that's flying saucers and UFOs. I don't focus on who's inside of them or what's inside of them. I think, for instance, abductions are an important part of the UFO story, but I'm no expert at all. That's why I got Kathy Martin to, I thought it should be included in the book, and I got Kathy to put her thoughts into the chapter on abductions. So, I hope I've covered things properly, and I'm sure there'll be folks that find things negative about it. Everybody's work, that happens to everybody's work. But I've done the best I could on this, and I hope people like it.
Yeah, I think what you've done is the book isn't out there. Grant hasn't done it. You took a stab at it, and you did a lot of your own research. And for me, as someone who loves this topic and looks into all of it, I learned things from your book. I definitely appreciated it, and And I think you did a great job at, giving people an overall perspective there. So I encourage people to definitely get it and take a look. And I think everybody's going to learn something from it. And I definitely appreciate the original investigative work you've done in it, because a lot of times people will just pick up other people's stuff or search for everything online, but you didn't do that. And I think it's important that people know you didn't just, comb Grant Cameron's website and pull stuff out of that for your book. You did a lot of original work in here and firsthand research that I think people will really appreciate.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do, Alejandro, and I hope people enjoy the book.
Yep. Well, I guess I'll probably see you in Roswell, right? Are you going to do Roswell again? You've been there the last few years.
I'll be there. I just sent all my information off to Karen at the museum, and so I'll be there, and look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, so we'll see you there. That's the July 4th weekend in Roswell, New Mexico, where they have their festival every year. And what else are you doing going forward? Are you going to work on another book? I know this one just came out March 17th, so you're probably really excited and in the middle of promoting this one.
Yeah, it's there's a lot going on, and I'm getting a lot of emails. I'm getting some very interesting emails, as I think I said earlier, from people that have had their own experience. One was a pre-med student in Oklahoma that wrote me of a sighting that she had in 1965 that she's never told anyone about, and it's a fascinating. Her story is fascinating, and she never told anyone about it for the reason that we all know, that she was afraid of being ridiculed. But in the book, if you remember, I related a story by a young woman that I called Sandy, which is not her real name, of a sighting that she had in California one night, and this lady read that, and she said it was so similar to the sighting that I had. After reading it in the book, I just had to contact you and relay my sighting. She said it makes me feel better to get it off my chest, because I just never talked to anybody about it. And she did have a twin sister that was with her in the car at the time that saw it also. But getting that sort of information from people, and getting nice notes and emails from people saying that they are enjoying the book and what have you. It's very gratifying, and has been a fun project. Yeah, I will probably start working on another book as soon as things level out and we see where we are with this book. It's fun to know, and it's exciting to know that it's going as of now, and perhaps more in the future, that it will at least be reprinted in 2 different foreign languages. I haven't heard from the UK. I sort of thought that there would be some interest in the UK. Of course, Nick Pope contributed to the book, but there may be more coming down the line. But it's been fun, and it is fun now. And it's so nice to hear from people that are interested in the subject and have enjoyed the book.
Mm-hmm. So I know it's on Amazon. Is that the best place for people to go and get it?
Well, as best I can tell, it's in. Of course, I've had a number. Kathy Martin emailed me yesterday and said that she had just seen it in Barnes and Noble, the Barnes and Noble store in where she lives in Florida, and several other people. I'm speaking at a couple of MUFON local meetings in Maryland and Virginia. One next month and one large meeting in the fall. And someone wrote that they had seen the book in the Barnes & Noble store in D.C. So it's in all the Barnes & Noble stores. Obviously, it's on Amazon. Looks like it's pretty well, it's out there. It's pretty well available.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope everything goes well with the book, and I guess we'll be talking to you soon.
I appreciate it, and Alejandro.
Thank you so much to Larry for coming on the show. Like I said, his book is really interesting, The Presidents and UFOs. It's got a lot of information in there. It is, like I said earlier, I think one of those books you got to have because you can reference some material. He's done some original, investigation. He's gone to a lot of libraries to get some information. So it's good to reference when you're putting together, and I think he also does some really good analysis of some of the more dubious cases as well. So it's a great book. I definitely recommend it, and it's got a really pretty cool cover of like some president standing there looking at a UFO or something like that. It reminds me of one of our covers where we all kind of, a lot of the guys in the office took pictures and we put them in the magazine as if they were looking at a UFO in the Rendlesham Forest. So it's similar to that. They copied our magazine covers, those goofballs. But anyway, check it out. Like you said, you can go to Amazon to get that printed by St. Martin's Press. So very exciting. Thank you all so much for joining us this week. Don't forget to check out our YouTube site. We've got new spacing out episodes. Don't forget to check out openminds.tv for more information about all of those stories that Jason and I talked about, as well as getting to the YouTube and our video portal. We're going to be posting some more videos up on the portal. In fact, some of you who can't get the DVD, or maybe you're in another country, have been asking about Bob Lazar and getting access to watch that video. We're going to be putting that up on our video portal, so just for a few bucks you'll be able to watch that and a ton of other videos. So our video portal is a great deal. You can watch lots of videos for a cheap monthly price, and then we put more and more videos. It's like a UFO Netflix, and it's definitely worth it. So go check that out. You can see that at openminds.tv as well. And I also want to thank Travis Walton. He's announced his 40th anniversary event. It's at skyfiresummit.com. And in fact, we were there, some of us with Open Minds last year, where they kind of did a smaller trial run event. And we did a lot of cool videotaping. So if you go to skyfiresummit.com, you'll be able to watch our Open Minds video that's on our YouTube channel about our interview with Travis and about that event. And this is going to be bigger and better, similar. So go to skyfiresummit.com to check this out. It's going to be in November. So he's going to be taking people to the place that his UFO event happened at the same time it happened, on the same day it happened. So we'll be able to be out there in the forest, and Open Minds will be out there. We'll do some filming, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm going to MC because the next couple of days he's going to have some speakers talking about UFOs and stuff. People like David Hatcher Childress, Tracy Torme, who wrote and produced the movie Fire in the Sky. Some people are really upset that they changed what happened on the craft in the movie Fire in the Sky. Tracy Torme will tell you how that came about and why that happened, and for better or worse, what was going on there. Really interesting stuff he has to share. And James Fox will be there because he's doing a new movie, The 701, with James Fox. So a lot of other people. Check out skyfiresummit.com to check that out. Otherwise, thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music. On the radio page, you can get to the link to the Something Chronicles I forget right now what it's called. But anyways, you'll see a link to Caleb Hanks and his music that he puts online for free. I love his music. It's awesome. So go check it out and download it. And then I also want to thank you all, as usual, for listening. We should be back next week, bar anything crazy happening. You never know in this field. We might have to go run and recover a downed extraterrestrial spacecraft. That'd be really cool. We haven't gotten a chance